of the 2J Turbo Kit. First, we'll walk through all the parts that come in the box, kind of how they fit together, what the bags mean, the numbers on the bag, and then we'll also show you some of the options that you can get to, or some things that we recommend when you put the kit together. All right, so first we'll start on the left side of the table. What we've got are the water feed lines that come in the kit. These are already pre-cut for you, the fittings, everything on there. And then going down from the top, you've got the fittings that go into the turbo. We'll show you those. These two fittings here are going to go on the water lines that come off the side of the block. We'll show you guys that. And then this is a cool little way to keep the lines together for the water lines. This is your drain. It already comes, again, cut with the fittings on it. The fittings are the same on both sides, same angle, but that doesn't matter which way it goes. This is the oil feed adapter that goes in the back of the block. This is where your oil idiot light is on the back of the block. This is a British pipe thread fitting here. So use Teflon tape, screw it into the block. Your original idiot light will screw into here. Of course, use Teflon tape. And then you're going to take the fitting, which is here. It's number 10291. That's going to screw into the top here. And then you'll take your line and then screw your line in to go back up over the valve cover. This other port is open, so you can use it for, it's for an oil pressure gauge, not temperature, because there's not enough fluid moving through here to get the temperature, but you can use for oil pressure gauge, or in the kit we've got the NPT where you can just cap that off. So into the block, your old oil idiot light screws in there, feed line with the fitting goes on the top. And then the other fittings that we have here, these three are actually going to go into the oil feed on the turbo. You've got your restrictor that screws in with the washer. And then this Allen screw actually has a hole in it. This is the restrictor. That's going to screw into the top of the fitting. It's very important that you install this restrictor, otherwise you're going to blow the seals on the turbo, because the QR is going to shit ton of oil pressure. Then after this is screwed in the turbo, then you're going to run this fitting here. This screws into the top. They're both 4ANs. So you'll have your 90, and then you'll screw the 4AN to 3AN fitting in here, which connects to the line. All right, we'll show you guys that. Next, we've got the oil drain, the billet oil drain that we created. This actually uses the dipstick drain, right? And the fitting here with your Teflon tape is going to screw in here. And then Robert will walk you through, once we're done with going through all this, how you cut your dipstick tube and the compression fitting and all that stuff and the O-rings that are there. Oil drain on the bottom of the turbo, which connects to the stainless line. Of course, we've got the gasket, all your couplers for the piping, your clamps for the intake. We'll walk you through that. These are all of the hoses that are for the heat exchanger, and they're all labeled, so it's real easy for you guys to figure out kind of where they go, and they're already cut to size too. Obviously your intercooler piping, brackets for the intercooler, your blow-off valves already attached. Obviously your tubular manifold, the Garrett GT28 ball bearing turbo, your stainless downpipe. This is going to be for the air-to-water intercooler, where you can actually fill up the system and then check to make sure that it's full. I'll have Robert walk you through the bags. That way you guys can understand what's in each bag and where they go.
Okay, for the first bag, A1. A1's for your downpipe. You got the Allen screws into the top, and then you got your regular hex bolts, goes to the bottom of the downpipe.
And then you got your gaskets here.
And here,
Yeah, for the downpipe.
A3 is your gaskets for your downpipe and your turbo. A2 is the studs and bolt and nuts for the turbo to bolt the turbo down onto your manifold. We got B1. B1 is for the stanchion for the intercooler, which goes through your tranny mount. You pull your factory bolts off the tranny mount, and then you stick these two bolts and tighten it down. Then you got B2. B2 is for your brackets for the side of the intercooler. You got this hex head, which is going to go right by the battery. This will bolt down to the 2 factory holes where your ground strap goes for your battery. You're going to move your ground strap, your negative ground strap on your battery over there.
We'll show you guys that too.
You got another little nut bolt right here. It goes on the side of the intercooler on this back side. Make sure you Teflon tape these nuts, these bolts that goes on the side of the intercooler, because if you don't, it will leak.
They're open.
They're open. You got B3. B3 is the 90s. That's going to go on your fill neck for the heat exchanger. You're going to point them both down. We'll show you and explain how that goes. The other bolt is to hold this down on the side of the intercooler. You got B4. B4 is the 90s. That goes on the intercooler, on the side of the intercooler. One here, one on the back side. And the other 2 is going to go on your heat exchanger, which is going to go on the very top right here. And we'll explain and show you how they go. Alright, now the B5 package is all your clamps for all your heat exchanger hoses. C1 has this foam tape. It's going to go around the water pump. It's going to go right here in this area. You just tape it around. This clamp in here, it's what's going to hold down that water pump. It's going to go with this bracket right here. You feed the clamp over, put the water pump on it, and just tighten it down. And this is going to go right where your harness is. We'll show you where that goes. C2 is a bunch of washers that's going to go behind your crash bar. To space the crash bar out some, so stuff won't be hidden.
3 washers per spec behind the crash bar.
C3 is what's going to hold this bracket onto your T.
The
your
radiator
radiators.
core support.
There's 2 holes right in that core support. You just put the bolt in and tighten it down with the nut. C4 is the 4 bolts that goes on the bottom, which is going to hold this heat exchanger onto the bracket. D1 it's for the connections for the fan for the heat exchanger. It's going to come with these. Just cut it off, put extension wires on it, and put these 2 connectors on it. And then you got these T connectors, which is going to hook up to your factory fan harness. Now with these, it's a black and a blue. The blue is going to be your ground, because you have to hook them up backwards so it can spin reverse. And then your black one is going to be your hot wire.
We've already reversed the fan, so it can run in reverse.
And then D2 is going to come with the up rev. This is your CAN wires and your connectors to hook it up to your dash and to the OBD port, the cluster and the OBD port.
And we've got instructions on how to use those. So quickly, we'll kind of walk you through kind of what each piece is. So like Robert said, we'll start with the manifold. Grab the A2 bag. You've got your stainless studs. Those will screw in here, right? You've got your gasket. Mount your turbo. And then you'll go ahead and take your nuts and then just put them on there loosely so that the turbo is mounted to the manifold. Now you have to make sure that your radiator and your fans are already installed before you put this in, because you can't get that in, after you've already put this in on the car. Next, after you get that together, we'll show you how the fittings go over here. So a moment ago we talked about the water fittings. So on the side of the turbo here, and then back here are the in and out for the water. Doesn't matter which one's which. But again, you're going to use the 2 fittings. The 10229 are going to screw into the turbo here to here. Now if the turbo mounts in the car, if this is the front of the car, right, you're going to run the one with a 120 degree angle. It's going to go this way and connect like that. on the turbo. So this faces the front of the car. And then the one with the 45-degree angle is going to go in the back of the turbo, like that. All right, also when you get the turbo, it may not be clocked correctly from Garrett. So you loosen the 13mm bolts on the outside and of course on the compressor side. And then you can watch Robert spin the center housing and position it correctly so that the oil feed is up top, which is there. And again, you'll make that adjustment so this is basically straight up and down when it's bolted down. All right, so if you look like we were just talking, you've got, it's kind of hard to see, but you've got the 120, which is there on the front of the turbo. You've got the 45 in the back. And then, remember we talked about the oil feed. So the restrictor, like I had explained, the 90, and then you've got the step down from the 4 to the 3 AN, and then you got the feed line, and you can see how we routed all those together. Right, and then we also talked about the stainless studs and the nuts that we've got there. Once you get the turbo, also check the coupling nuts and the nut on the wastegate too. Check these nuts as well. Every, I don't know, I would say probably, I don't know, week to 2 weeks for at least the first month. Always check these bolts on the downpipe, the bolts on the manifold. These, just because from heat, expansion, contraction, they come loose. And the ones that hold the wastegate, these to the turbo, all come loose because it's a QR and it vibrates obviously like crazy. All right, so that's the installation of the turbo on and the water lines into the turbo, right? On the back side, we talked about how to rotate the housing, right? And make sure everything's tight again. On the bottom, you've got the drain, which we've got the gasket and the vibrant fitting and the bolts and everything. Obviously, just put it in there. You can put some Loctite on here if you like to hold it together. But again, pretty much, you know, it should hold itself at that point. All right, so I'm gonna let Robert take over. Oh, real quickly, like I said, doesn't matter which side you use, but you attach the, obviously the drain line to the drain after it's on the turbo, and then it'll go into our billet drain into the block. So Robert will walk you through how to make those cuts to set that up correctly.
All right, once you pull your dipstick out of your car, you're gonna grab it. You're gonna measure from the very bottom. And you're gonna make a mark close to 5 7/8, and just make a mark and just cut it. Then once you cut it, you just throw this little piece away. Then you're gonna grab the top section of it. You're gonna slide it in this compression fitting. You unscrew this. There'll be a little sleeve in here. Make sure this tapered part is up towards the nut. You just slide the top section of your dipstick in here. Slide the dipstick and the compression fitting up on here. And just tighten it. Hold this, because this is already taped onto the billet. Just hold it with a wrench here and tighten this with another wrench. And just get it snug as you can. Now you see how this one's set up? It has a fitting on it. You want to kind of, the back side of the billet, you want to kind of line it up with the hole, the holder hole, to bolt it up. You might have to make some adjustments and bend it a little bit, but just tweak it to fit, make sure it's not hitting the alternator or the manifold.
Right, and it will still bolt up to the stock location. So once you bolt it together, then you can tighten this down once you've got it set up correctly. And then on the bottom of the fitting, our billet piece, is a new dipstick O-ring. It's the same part number that we use for this. Fits on the bottom of this. So make sure that that's there, right? And then the most important thing, once you put this together, let's say your whole kit's done, you cannot run the dipstick in here. If you run the dipstick in here, that's going to block the way the oil drains, and it's going to back up the turbo. So leave the dipstick out, and then we created this cap with the O-ring that goes in, and that stays always like that. You need to check your oil, take this out, go get your dipstick, put it in, check it, take that out and put this back in. Make sure you never overfill your oil. If the oil level goes up to where the bottom of this is, you'll back up your turbo, all right? Always make sure your oil level is just below the full mark, okay? Otherwise, you're gonna end up with some serious issues with oil backing up in your turbo. And then, of course, we talked about the fitting that is 223 that goes into the side of the billet mount at that point. All right, so this part we're going to cover actually how to connect the water lines from the engine. We're going to run through here. Of course, they go to the turbo. We already covered how those go in the turbo. So you've got two of the fittings that are 16-880. They look like this. And both of them screw in to the back of the fittings that we've got here on the 90. And then you've got your barb right there. So let me show you where that goes on the engine. So if you look here, you can see how they connect. They come off one of them comes off the water line on the neck. You can see the hose goes up. You've got your fitting there. The barb goes in, the clamp goes around it, and then the line attaches to it. And then on the other side, it's kind of hard to see because the clip's in the way here, but the line comes off the block, goes up, and then connects to the other side of the hose. This one right there. Of course, they come around and they connect, and we showed you how they go. Next, we're going to talk about how you mount the heat exchanger and the fans. You can see with the fan, the way that it's mounted, you've got the foam, then you've got your clip that goes to the backside. You just make sure that that's tight. And just obviously the fan faces outboard. You've got, which Robert told you, the bolts in the bag, the way it mounts together. And then I don't know if you could see it here, but if you look in the back, you see how it mounts with the existing holes that are already in the core support. You're going to run the hoses, if you can see how we did it, actually this way, which fit nicely in that little gap in the crash bar. And then they'll just run straight over, and then they'll connect to the top of the heat exchanger, just like that with the 90s. Of course, make sure you use your Teflon tape.
The one that goes on the back of the intercooler, it's going to go down through the little hole, up through the crash bar, up around, and it's going to go to your heat exchanger. The other hose is going to go from the heat exchanger back around through the core support, back up through this hole, and it's going to go to your filler neck. The other side of the filler neck is going to go down behind this intercooler onto the side of the water pump. Then the front of the water pump is going to go up into the front of this intercooler right here. And that should be all 4 lines for your heat exchanger and your intercooler.
Now remember, when not that we've explained this yet, but you're actually going to install the cap and the hoses and the lines before you install the intercooler. Otherwise, there's no way to get to this once it's all together. So even before and we'll show you real quick, but even before you put this in, these are all going to be assembled, and then you're just going to drop it in place. All right. Now quickly, I had mentioned before the wires for the fan, as they come up and come around and connect to your existing fan wires. With Nissan, there's 4 wires per clip for the OEM fans, and they're both the same on each side. The top 2 wires are positive, the bottom 2 wires are negative. You're going to connect the black wire to one of the top 2 wires, and you're going to connect the blue wire to one of the bottom 2 wires, right? And then that'll make sure your fan turns on correctly for that. So here, Robert will show you on the intercooler on the back side, when you attach the filler, make sure with the bolt that you're going to use thread sealant, and then it attaches this way. Put your fittings on, make sure all that's together even before you drop. Oh, and then put your hoses on as well too, even before you put the intercooler on the car. All right, so let's go look at the stanchion that goes under the intercooler, which is actually this piece right here. Right, there's going to be a little rubber stopper on the top as well for that. And I don't know if you guys can see it, but it's pretty simple. There you see the little stopper there, but it uses the existing, there you go, the existing transmission bolts, not bolts, sorry, bolt holes, and then use the bolts that we provided to attach the stanchion. And then this bolt here, make sure you put your Teflon tape on, and then you can see how it attaches back there. And with, I don't know if you could see it, but somewhat, but the mount again for the water pump goes in the back corner.
So actually,
and
here, you can see it here. This is where the water pump bracket bolts to, right there, on that zinc piece, and we provide the bolts for that.
All right, so now we've got the intercooler piping. Pretty simple. You can see the style of coupler that goes here, goes into the intercooler, same size, 2.5, 2.5. The blow-off valve's already attached, and then coming off of the intercooler, it steps up to 2.75, which is actually the factory diameter piping, and then right into the throttle body. So then you'll be good to go with that.
All right, these are your heat exchanger hoses. Now this one is going to be the shortest one. The shortest one is going to go from the front of the pump to the intercooler. The second shortest is going to go to the pump to the filler neck. This is the one that runs behind the intercooler onto the side of the water pump right here. It's going to go right on the side behind the intercooler to your filler neck. The third one is going to go from the other side of the filler neck behind the intercooler through the hole to the crash bar to the heat exchanger, to the passenger side of the heat exchanger. The longest hose is going to go from the back side, closer to the fender side of the intercooler, through the hole, through the crash bar, and to the driver's side of the heat exchanger. This is going to be your longest one.
All right, let's talk about fueling. So in the kit, you're going to get a set of 440cc injectors. These are Bosch Motorsports injectors, and they come with the plug-and-play clips. So you don't have to do anything except for install the injectors, put a little bit of grease on the O-rings, obviously, install the clips directly onto the injectors, and then your factory harness will plug in. And then if you've got an 04 to 06 and you ask for the uprev option, you'll get your little uprev cable with the license and everything in here, and you'll actually call us and we'll send you the base tune. So that way you can flash it and the car runs on the 440s, and you can take it to the dyno and get it dyno tuned. You'll also get your 255 pump that goes in the tank. Obviously, make sure you install this too so you get enough fuel volume. Now, these injectors, they're only good for about like 295 horsepower. So anything more than that, you need to upgrade to 770s, 850s, 1000s, whatever you want to do. The max capacity in that turbo is right about 400 wheel horsepower. So anything more than that, it just kind of caps out at that size. We had it built especially with an 82 hot side housing, so it's a nice big housing, but again, because of its small size, you're only going to see, like I said, 400 wheel, and then it just kind of caps out at that point. Next, obviously in the kit is the boost gauge, right? Wherever you want to put it in the car, that's fine. You're going to see typically the wastegate set for about 7-8 pounds, so you'll see it start at about 7 pounds, and right towards the end, it'll probably get up to about 9-ish. Just because it's ball bearing and the thing spins so damn fast with that manifold. Your K&N filter, right? It's in the kit, pretty simple. One thing I recommend when you put in the fuel pump is actually getting a new O-ring for the tank, right? Because you open the tank up, they always expand, and you're left with an O-ring that's too big and crappy. So get one of those, and then of course there's the part number, obviously. Now, it's very important. Keep in mind, a lot of these cars are between 12 and 15 years old, and the fuel filter is actually in the canister. You can't change it. So if you have any problems with fueling when you install this kit, the car is running super lean, there's big problems, 99% of the time it's because your canister is dirty. You can't see it, but it's getting no fuel volume up to the fuel rail. So eBay sells the Bosch canisters, or even the cheap ones work too for like $100 for the cheap ones. I think a Bosch is like $200. So if you're unsure, change your fuel canister. I mean the whole thing. Put our pump in it, and you won't have any fueling issues. It's a really good peace of mind to actually do that. Next is here. This is extremely important. You got to make sure that you get this correctly. So let me show you how we set it up. It already has the fitting that goes in front of the filter. You're going to get a hose that connects from here to this side of the valve cover, right? Now, typically what you'd want to do in almost every case, put a catch can in between here and here to catch the vapor, because it's just going to run back through. You want the turbo to pull all of the pressure right out of the valve cover. Otherwise, you build up a lot of internal pressure in the engine, and you can blow your front main seal out, or worse, your rear main seal. So definitely run the hose in here. What we recommend, and you can get this, and I'll show you, is a 3-port catch can, which is down here. It's from Mishimoto. So you've got 2 ins and the out, right? So the out's obviously going to go to the pipe that we've got before the filter, and an in is one side of the valve cover, and an in is the other side of the valve cover. So you actually got both ports in the valve cover going into the Mishimoto catch can. And the cool thing is, every couple weeks, you unscrew it, you drain it, and you're good to go. If this ever fills up, or any of your catch cans fill up, it's just going to run oil straight out of here in front of your turbo, all through the piping. The car's going to run like shit. So always make sure that your catch can's always drained. Another thing that we recommend is obviously the titanium header studs to hold your turbo manifold down. They're really badass looking, and they're super strong. You won't get any leaks with that. I don't think they've ever come loose on any of the kits that we've used. That's a good peace of mind. Obviously, we'll talk about a couple other things. Spark plugs. Get a set of 1-step colder plugs. All right, these are the LFR 6A11s. They're 1-step cold in stock. We've got them, or you can pick them up. Change your plugs, run 1-step colder. For another peace of mind, run a wideband. It's probably one of the most important things. Make sure that your AFRs are always in check. When you're in boost, like a high 10, mid 11 is where you want to be, right? If you're seeing like low 12s, upper 12s, 13, and you're deep in boost, you're way too lean. If you're 10-0 or pegged out, you're way too rich. So, like I said, high 10s, mid 11s is where you want to be when you're full boost, So obviously you need that to make sure that your car's running correctly. Another thing we recommend is cheap. You got your stock motor mounts, just get the inserts. It'll keep your motor from rocking back and forth. The wastegate sits really close to the radiator, so you want to limit the amount of movement. These are $35, $36. They're cheap. They're on the website. And the last thing is for your vacuum lines. We have these blocks, really cool vacuum blocks with all the fittings and shit that comes with that, and the plugs and everything. So if you want to run the vacuum line for the wastegate, for the blow-off valve, for your boost gauge, for all that shit, these are really cheap. We have them, and it makes the installation super easy. Let's see what else. And then a boost controller. If you want to get a boost controller, meaning your motor's built, you can handle more than 280 horsepower, then I would say GoFats bits is pretty good. So just quickly, like we were saying, here's that vacuum block, and you can see all the fittings and stuff that goes in there. The catch can we've got mounted there. That's his electronic boost controller, this boost gauge. And then that is pretty much the kit itself. So if you guys have any questions, always reach out to us, and we'll be happy to help you. All right, now we're going to cover, if you got an 02 or 03, how to set up your SAFC. This is an SAFC2 for the 440 injectors. So first thing, go down to etc. And then sensor type, you'll always use the hot wire.
Select that, and then you'll be 21, 21, both numbers. And sensor calculation 1 and 1 is what you need for that one. Make sure that is set. Car select, whoops, is 4-cylinder, and the arrow is pointing up for that one. Next, we'll cover how I've set the high and low throttle percentages. Again, this is really just a baseline for the injectors. So if we'll walk through it, we'll go back. So I've set them up. The range is 1,000, 16, 2,200. These are RPM limits: 28, 34, 4,000, 46, 5,200, 58, and 64. And again, these other ones, obviously, if it's not, you don't have the increased rev limit, then it's kind of pointless, but they're there, so I've got them. So let me kind of show you those real quick. 1,000's at 0, 1,600's at -7, 22 is at -9, 28's -14, 24, 29, 34, 32, 30, and 30 as well. That's on the high side. And we'll go back. And on the low side, to make it run idle, got the same RPM ranges. And I'll show you those. I'm at +3, then 14, 26, 25, 23, 27, 21, 21. And I run that all the way across. And that's obviously for, you know, your differences when it switches over between high and low on the throttle. And then my throttle point, I've got 10 and 50%. And it correlates those two together on those. And then that's just setting your throttle points. All right, so that should help you guys out in setting this up.